All right, this is sixth video of chapter 11 lecture about work, money, and leisure. And hopefully this is going to be the last one. And we're talking about probably something that you're most interested in this chapter. Consumption and happiness. Does money buy happiness? It's a billion-dollar question, right? And many of us are interested in, and probably you have heard something. You may have read a pop science article about it too. Now, the chapter talked about that, and I wanted to expand on that because the science is, advancing in this area, and the findings are basically more nuanced than the presented in a textbook, right? So there you go. So first of all, I want to divide happiness into two things, like not just happiness. We know it's about happiness is multifaceted, right? One aspect is hedonic, eating cookie like a pleasant happiness, pursuit of pleasant life, versus eudaimonic, pursuit of good life kind of thing. So first, we're going to focus on the hedonic side of happiness, mostly, right? And there are different levels of what we mean by consumption and wealth and money, basically. At the national level of the money and wealth and consumption, the answer to this question, does money buy happiness, is mostly yes. If you look at the world map with this map, the country with the bluer, thicker, darker bluer color are reported higher level of happiness, okay? And they also turn out to be richer countries. Most North American country, US, Canada, North European, Scandinavian country, Western European countries, Australia, New Zealand, those countries, they tend to be. Some of the Eastern Asian countries like Japan and South Korea, not too bad. South America is a bit of exception. They're not necessarily the high ranked in terms of GDP, but they're very happy people. So we want to know more about them. But anyway, yes, there is a moderate positive correlation between actually national wealth and the average happiness level in the country. There is. We know that. Now, what about household level, like each family, right? Level. And that's what we mean usually, household level happiness. The answer is to an extent. And there's science to it. There's a lot of research has been done. And that's what the chapter meant. So this graph is not really, accurate per se, but it's just visualize how the relationship goes. So annual income, right, household income increases as we go to the right side. Happiness increases from the bottom to the top, right? So as income increases, happiness increases pretty rapidly at the beginning, and then eventually kind of level off. It's called a ceiling effect. And that's what we meant by to an extent. And that tipping point is typically around $75,000 US dollar per year per household. And this is mostly based on US data, but how do you feel? $75,000. After that, gaining more household income doesn't really buy you happiness, or at least your family happiness. If you're on the left side of the picture, you will get more gain in happiness as you earn more. Now, that also depends on, and that was the case, and that also depends on where you live. Gallup, the survey company, right, a couple years ago, and they also did a major survey, and what they found and what they were interested in is this: where's this tipping point? $75,000 in the previous slide, right? Tipping point. How that varies potentially depending on the regions. And I'm sorry, this is again US data. We should do this in Canada too, right? But in a more relatively expensive area, like some of the Atlantic area to like Pacific area, California, Washington, they're typically more expensive. And interestingly, those Midwest area, for example, Illinois, Michigan, Wisconsin, they're also very expensive area too. When they are in there, the tipping point is even higher, even over $100,000 per year per household. Probably because they're surrounded by other rich people, right? There's some level of social comparisons to that too. Now, but if you are in the countryside in Texas, which is like down below there, it's even $54,000 per year, give or take. Tipping point. Again, in these areas, countryside maybe especially, I mean, Texas has a big city like Houston, so that's probably depending on within those state as well. But most of the areas, you know, it's a simpler life, right? There's a lot of rich people around you to compare things around you. So maybe 54,000, you're good enough. And then things are cheaper too, relatively. So there you go. To an extent, it depends on where you live. And also depends on how you spend it, what to do with that money. For example, Dunn and colleagues, they did a research on what is called pro-social spending. So on the left side of the picture, you know, two picture or. What I mean by that is one of the experiments they did is with the students actually. So I'll give you $50. Yeah, right? You're gonna come to my office and pick up that $50 probably. So I'm not gonna give you the actual $50, but hypothetically, I will give you $50 if I am to do this research to you. In the next 5 hours, you must spend that $50 either to buy something for yourself or to buy something for, you know, other people, mostly like your family and friends. You must spend. Go. And then I will measure your happiness level right now, but before I give you $50, right? And then give you $50 and you go spend it. Come back and I will measure your happiness level. Who do you think were happier? The people who spend it for themselves or spend it for other people? The same amount of money. So probably, you know, you guessed it right. People who spend it for other people. It's called a pro-social spending. It has very robust correlation, positive relationship with their, well, people's well-being and happiness. Although that depends to an extent actually where you live, which is very interesting. In this world, like map, the global map, right, the greenish country is where this pro-social spending, you know, using money for other people, have a positive impact on our happiness and well-being. So Canada, yeah. US, yeah. Right, some of the other countries in Central and Southern American, Russia, China, Mongolia, US, India is not so much actually. Some of those Southeast Asian countries, Australia, New Zealand, some of the African countries, European countries, there too. But there are some red countries where actually the relationship is reversed. I don't know why. We don't know why. Actually, I'd love to take a look at those. You know, if you are from those countries, please tell us what's going on. But most of the time, but the degree to which it brings you happiness depends. And I would expect that especially collectivist society like China, Japan, gift giving can be actually tricky. You know, you give it to other, you have to think about you're also giving a responsibility and their sense of owing to other that they feel like they have to give it back, right? So that's a little bit of a tricky thing. There's maybe cultural factors too, but overall, depends on how you use it and probably you should use for others. Now, this is probably a good time to talk about Christmas shopping, which some of you may be doing. It's actually a good thing for your happiness. It is, scientifically speaking. Now, what about eudaimonic well-being, right? What about like meaningful life? What about like life worth living? What about good life? Now, there is less research about this. By the way, did you notice like there's a star mark again, you know, new strategy that I put in to emphasize the slides with the star, blue star is important, especially, and it's one of those slides. Now, Roy Baumeister, one of the most famous psychologists right now, he did some study. He asked these questions, okay, to what extent do you agree with these statements? I can buy what I need. Maybe 1 to 7, right? To what extent do you agree? I can buy what I want, 1 to 7. scarcity of money, right? That's the opposite side of the two statements. He also measured happiness, hedonic well-being of the people, meaningfulness, eudaimonic well-being of people. Interesting pattern emerged. For hedonic happiness, there is a robust relationship, there's systematic relationship, consistent relationship with those money spending, consumption. That's consistent with the stuff that we saw, right, so far. Now, we didn't see that relationship, statistically significant relationship with the meaningfulness, with the eudaimonic well-being. So that's money by eudaimonic well-being. We don't know too much about it yet. But based on this study, the answer is not really. No. So the last part of the chapter talk about this leisure's benefits to economy, leisure's cost to economy. There are a few things that chapter talk about. For example, leisure facilities attract the business, like you make a shopping mall, right? There's like not a lot of shops inside, of course, but also around that, there's going to be hotels, there's going to be restaurants, there's going to be LRT train coming in, It develops economy, right? And if you've never been to like Edmonton, we have West Edmonton Mall, which was actually one of the biggest shopping mall in North America before, still pretty big, right? So there, exercising 3 times or more as an employee worker per week leads to 6 to 10% increase in your pay, statistically, according to one study. There's an interesting gender difference, right? But arguably because of the increased productivity. Maybe not. That part wasn't part of the research, but this relationship is the fact. What about sports mega event? We talk about that. Those things like Olympics. 2021 may or may not happen in Tokyo again. We'll see, right? World Cup, things like that. Sports mega event and economic impact. Because when those cities and country apply for those hosting, those events. One of the reasons, especially for their own people of their own country is that, it's going to be good for our economy, which isn't necessarily the case. But for example, in the case of 2002 World Cup, co-hosted by South Korea and Japan, these researchers calculated that there was $307 million gain in South Korea, although that involves everything, right? From air tickets to all that kind of stuff. And it doesn't consider the cost, how much money the government and everybody else spend on it. And there are sports events, what we call legacy, it's always problematic, Of course, it's not just economy, there's sustainability, many other issues. But it may make some money. Now, more interestingly, in our field, for example, John Crompton, he was an economist of leisure, and he did research about park and existence of park in a neighborhood and how that impact property prices of the houses in that neighborhood. And that there was a positive impact up to 20%. So that means, let's say you have a house worth $500,000, right, in a neighborhood. Me and my wife were looking at those markets. So $500,000, let's say. Same house, same oldness, same number of rooms and bathrooms and all that. One is in a community without a parks. The other one is in a community with the with the park, neighborhood park. The one without a park, $500,000. The other one, 20% more. So that's $600,000. Most likely somewhere between. So there's that positive, benefit. Parks. So when you're thinking about buying a house, or eventually you buy a house, that happens. Okay, so you might want to think about, oh, there's a park. That means maybe property price, there's a positive impact. Now, the other study by Sato and colleagues found that, again, in a US data, 1% increase in a physical activity level among older adults may lead to $200,000 reduction in the healthcare cost in a county, at a county level. County is like a very small town in a way, pretty much. A few towns sometimes, with 10,000 older adults or not, or 10,000 older adults living in that country. So that means $20 per older adults decrease in healthcare cost. 1% increase in a physical activity level. 1%. That depends on how much people are having physical activity already, but only 1%. Right? That's quite a bit, maybe, especially at a county level. That's a lot of money. We're not even talking about not necessarily big cities inside, maybe sometimes, but maybe not. It would create, that means for Edmonton, it would create a probably easily millions of dollars reduction in healthcare cost if we can do this. If this applies to Canada, of course. Finally, the chapter talks about, does leisure cost an economy? That's a very interesting phrase, right? The cost is not necessarily bad for economy, actually, right? Cost means somebody is using money, and that's actually money to somebody else, and it's production of stuff in the services. So that's not necessarily a bad thing, but hey, for example, decreased productivity during holidays. Of course, people are away, so they don't work. Although there's a slight increase in the productivity after holidays and vacation, seasonal nature of the leisure industry is always problematic. Like summer camp, maybe you have worked, part-time job or something, swimming pool. Those things only open during summer, right? So it's really difficult to maintain. It's an economy, and the market and industry is not so sustainable sometimes, right? And the cost to solve sometimes leisure creates a problem. Littering, graffiti, rescues, right? It's cost us so much, our society. A lot of tax goes into that. But if you think about it, it's not cost. This cost isn't so bad per se in a way. I mean, it's part of the nature, part of this, society, that it goes to certain industries, certain jobs, and part of the economy as well, from the macroeconomy perspective, of course. And then finally, leisure activity related injuries, incidents leads to decreased wage, insurance pay, lawsuits, those things. Again, but those things are actually services consumed, so it's not actually necessarily a bad thing from a macro perspective. But of course, for you as a person, for example, you don't want to get injured and do that probably because, yeah, your wage can be decreased. So that depends on where you stand on. But you can see the point is the leisure and economy is so deeply tied. And you can take a look at that relationship from multiple perspectives. So I hope that this chapter expanded your perspective on, hey, the relationship between leisure, economy, and something, quality of life and happiness as well, that more, and hopefully how complex the relationship is. That's the end of the chapter 11, and I hope you enjoy it, and good luck with the quiz and everything. Bye now.